Pete Lloyd is a longtime Mount Pleasant resident and a business owner who wants to become the next Mount Pleasant Waterworks Commissioner. I talk one-on-one with Pete for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Pete Lloyd, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you, Quintin.
I appreciate it greatly. Last week, I was working in and around the Wingaway area, and of course, I saw your big sign at one of the law firms over there. And of course, people in Mount Pleasant know that obviously you are a longtime Mount Pleasant resident. You founded the popular remodeling company, Citadel Enterprises Inc. in 1991.
Yep.
And of course, now you want to become the next Waterworks Commissioner for the town of Mount Pleasant.
I do.
Yeah. Being a successful businessman that you are, why Mount Pleasant Waterworks Commissioner? Why now?
Quintin, I guess I've had an evolution going on in my life. Everything's good. Yeah. Very fortunate. I'm lucky. And one of those things that I'm fortunate about is that my business has gotten to a point where I have employees and staff that can do without me some of the time. So I'm not leaving anytime soon. Retirement's quite a ways away, but I kind of feel like I'm getting in the way a little bit. I'm old school. I'm a dinosaur, and they're like, all right, go find something to do. So I learned about this opportunity, and by nature, I'm a curious person, and I love anything to do about construction. And Mount Pleasant Waterworks has a lot of that going on, and has had that going on for many, many years. So there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be maintained, improved, and Mount Pleasant will continue to grow.
Yeah.
The growth has slowed down a lot, and I think that's a good thing, but there'll still be a little bit of growth. If you're not going to grow, you're going to die. And I have been active in the community and in environmental causes for many years, and I kind of put that on the back shelf for a while, and now I'm ready to do that again. And the term of a Waterworks Commissioner is 6 years. So this is not just a year or two and then you flip over. So this is a big commitment on my part, and I'm ready to give it my all.
Wow. You talk about the infrastructure, you talk about the growth. So let me ask you this. Where exactly do infrastructure need to be improved right now in the town of Mount Pleasant?
So there are a lot of things that you can't see because they're underground, and there's a lot of things that you can see. They're at the wastewater treatment facility and at the wells and whatnot. But these pipes, they're subject to environmental deterioration from the environment. And the pipes can get clogged over time. They can get damaged. The fittings, that's a big deal, deteriorate. And so the staff at Waterworks, they have to go out and they've got to inspect these systems, and they actually use cameras that can go through the pipes and record the condition, and that's how they evaluate it.
How many infrastructure projects are in the works right now for the Mount Pleasant Waterworks?
There are a number of them. I don't know what they are exactly or where they are, but there's sewer service being brought to the Snowden area. It's being extended down Rifle Range Road, and also into the Shem Creek corridor.
Yes, indeed. I like it over there. And you talk about obviously those infrastructure issues and obviously growth. And I know that the Mount Pleasant Waterworks is providing high quality drinking water and reliable wastewater service, that is, where and when customers need it at the core of their business. So what exactly is the quality of water right now in the town of Mount Pleasant?
It's excellent. It ranks very high. It has consistently. It's safe. It's not inexpensive to make it that way. It takes a lot of systems, but it's something that people in Mount Pleasant don't worry about.
Yes, sir. And I know earlier you talked about obviously those infrastructure projects in Snowden and of course Rifle Range and the corridor of Shem Creek in that area. Where else should infrastructure be focused on right now when you think of waterworks and the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, I think that goes a little bit towards the aspect of growth versus controlled growth and no growth.
Right.
There are schools or groups of people that are very opinionated about that. Personally, I believe in stemming the growth that was continued, say, from 20 years ago to present. But again, I think each development needs to be evaluated on its own. And I believe in being a collaborator to bring in the developers with staff, with the commission, and with the city. And I'd love to get input from the citizens on when and how to do that. I also believe in property rights.
Oh, yes.
Ownership of land is important to a lot of people, and it's a dream for a lot of younger people.
Yes.
And land, it's like you putting your wallet out here.
Right.
You've got money in it, or your savings account,
Right.
retirement account,
Right.
whatever. And I start messing with that, you're not going to like that.
No.
And so the property rights are very important. So each case evaluated on an as-needed basis.
And I know you talked earlier, Mr. Pete, about obviously the growth being slowed down in the town of Mount Pleasant. So where exactly is growth being slowed down there in the town of Mount Pleasant?
Going up Highway 17 North
Yes.
is an area that can grow. Allendale is experiencing growth. Allendale does not have sewer service. I believe they're mostly all on septic tanks.
Right.
But Mount Pleasant has a requirement that you need to be annexed into the town of Mount Pleasant in order to qualify for sewer service.
Right.
That's one area of growth, and then you've got the national forest, which is going to limit it. Up Highway 41, it's pretty much at a dead end.
Yeah.
Although there is some discussion about some development up there that could or could not qualify. And of course, you've got more retail, light industrial, and infill projects that have potential to create more of a demand on water.
And I know, Pete, earlier we talked about obviously, development going towards, Highway 41, North Mount Pleasant, on down McClellan Road. So what ideal development would be right for that area right now?
I believe that is going to be market driven. It's a developer needs to evaluate what kind of rate of return he's going to get on his investment. So I really can't answer that. I personally, I'm not, and again, I don't mean to sound like an elitist, but a cookie cutter type subdivision to me doesn't really excite me. But then that's my personal preference. So as to what type, I think I think there's a burgeoning population in Mount Pleasant, so I would assume it would be single-family residential.
Let me ask you this: how should the Mount Pleasant Waterworks continue to actually reinvest in infrastructure to actually keep the water system operating reliably that really places demand on our financial resources?
So the financial resources, that's a huge aspect of it. It's, as with everything else, subject to inflation. And in talking with people during my campaign, I have heard some gripes about the water rates. And I certainly wouldn't want to convince somebody that I have the power to keep them in check, like not change them or reduce them. I just don't think that's realistic, given inflation and the growth that Mount Pleasant has had. But the waterworks gets its income from the fees that it charges, both for water and wastewater. It gets fees from its development fees, which are fees that charge up front to a developer to help pay for that additional infrastructure. And it also has another source of revenue. Actually, I wouldn't call it revenue, but it's cash would be loans and grants.
Right, that's exactly right. Where right now in the town of Mount Pleasant are developers paying for that extra infrastructure for water and wastewater?
Well, the areas that are growing are mostly in North Mount Pleasant. And as a matter of fact, Quintin, those areas up there, i.e. Rivertown, Dunes West, Park West, Commonwealth, Carolina Park, that is a huge voter base. Those people vote. Another beehive of activity as far as voting is concerned is the Old Village, and another one is kind of that Mathis Ferry corridor. When you look at on a map, you look at Ion, Somerset Point, Old Park, that area. There's a lot of voters there as well.
Wow. And where do you see those developers going at next as far as growth?
Really, it's actually, I think there's an opportunity for some infill development. It could mean demolishing existing structures. I think there's a start of a ground movement to actually build a separate living quarter on somebody's lot. Call it a mother-in-law suite. And I think that's a pretty neat way to increase living space for those, say, older generations in the family without adding to sprawl.
Right. What is the future of that population in Mount Pleasant in your mind?
It's growing. The great generation, as they call it, is moving through. The baby boomers, which I would like to think that I'm at the very tail end of, that's an increasing population. And quite frankly, that I don't even know what they call the generations for, I shouldn't call them kids, but teenagers and that. Maybe you can help me with that. Gen X, I don't know. But I think the older segment of our population is definitely growing.
What water resources do those people need right now?
Well, we all need it.
Yeah.
You can't survive without it. It is. I think we all take it for granted, but it's nothing can live without it, and so that's what they need. And they need it to be reliable, and of course, wastewater is a huge thing too. And talking about that, older generations and what do they need, where we do see problems that is very concerning are some of the areas that are on septic tanks that are failing. Snowden comes to mind. It's kind of a low-lying area, and they've had issues with their septic tanks for years. I can remember going back over 20 years ago for a church project and encountering some pretty upsetting conditions with septic tanks overflowing. And this, some of those folks are a little underprivileged, and so Mount Pleasant Waterworks is doing what it can to get sewer to them. Ultimately, though, they still have to come out of pocket for a portion of it, and that is to connect it from their house to the sewer.
And how much does that cost right now?
I don't know exactly, but I would figure it's probably on the order of $5,000. Of course, it depends how far they have to go, that sort of thing.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this: where should people, or where can people do search for actual alternative water sources?
Down there, the Middendorf aquifer is a big supply line. We also buy water from the city of Charleston. We can get it from the Goose Creek Reservoir. But it's interesting that you ask that question, because something that's on my mind is how can we take the wastewater treatment to a level where it gets recycled to safe drinking water. And right now that isn't happening in Mount Pleasant. It's being looked at, but I don't know where, but there are other areas, even on large ships, where they actually are working toward that.
Wow.
And that, who knows, maybe 25 years from now, that could be a source.
If that were to be a source 25 years from now, before Jesus Christ returns, then let me ask you, how much would that actually cost the town of Mount Pleasant?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't speak to that. I couldn't speak to that. But that is something that I think staff is working on. Yeah, they're working on that. And hopefully I'll be getting in there and be able to learn more about that.
You mentioned the city of Charleston, of course, the commissioners of public works, as we used to know it. But does the 30-year extension to Mount Pleasant Waterworks with the water purchase contract with the Charleston water system, does that appear to be adequate to meet the demands for services for the next 25 years?
Again, I'm not exactly sure, but I believe that that's very doubtful. We do rely on it, but we do have other sources too.
Sure.
So, knock on wood, it's working out now.
Yes, sir.
Let's hope it continues.
And where is there a reduction in growth of customers due to the town's permit allocation system?
Right. The allocation system has been in the town of Mount Pleasant's toolbox off and on for a number of years. And currently they have restricted on the number of ADU permits that they issue, which is accessory dwelling units.
Right.
That goes back to like the mother-in-law suite. And again, I think that's a fabulous idea for people to look at. So permits are available, but they're restricted on the number they issue, and restricted on the timing of those things. It could take a year or more to get a permit for that project.
Do you know how many permits have been issued thus far in the past 6 months or so?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
And where is demand for capacity extension due to obviously, as you just mentioned earlier, slow growth?
Right. So it's going to be, I think, if the single-family residential need kind of tapers off as it seems to be doing, I think it's going to be in light industry and commercial, where they're big box type stores, car washes, those sorts of developments. And light manufacturing, that's going to increase the need.
And I'm thinking about the Costco right there, right there near Parkway, in North Mount Pleasant. Right. And of course, they're adding some car washes around the town.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, and even where I live up North Charleston. But let me ask you, how would you actually help the administration, say for instance, analyze the physical impact of lower impact fees and for obviously new customer revenue?
So, staff looks at that very closely. They have a pretty solid 5-year projection on all the numbers. So based on what they know and the information that they give to me, I know that impact fees are not very popular with developers. They feel it's pretty stringent. However, I'm also questioning whether or not they really cover the expense needed, maybe not just for the initial infrastructure, but for continuing that and maintaining that infrastructure.
Yeah. What incentive do you want the developers to bring into the town of Mount Pleasant when it comes to wastewater and water in general?
But I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, what incentives would you like the investors, the developers to bring in for wastewater and water?
I would like to see some collaboration and getting some input so that the permitting process is more streamlined and less frustrating. I don't know that there would be an incentive as far as decreasing the impact fees, but I would like to streamline that permitting process. Which can take a very long time, and it's frustrating.
What else do you want to break as far as that red tape?
Yeah. Well, you know, there's red tape with Waterworks and there's red tape with the town of Mount Pleasant. You know, they're somewhat dependent on each other, but they are separate entities. I can vouch on my experiences in dealing with the Mount Pleasant Building Inspection Office, which has seen some changes, and this needs to work out some kinks. I think it's a matter of bringing the developers and the builders in and get them in the same room and say, you know, what can we do to make this easier? What kind of questions do you have? That sort of thing.
And what questions do the typical water customers have right now for the building department and for those developers?
Well, the building department is really a face-to-face thing between the actual contractor and the staff there. As far as Waterworks, I have heard a gripe such as their operating hours seem to be inconsistent, or the person that they needed to get an answer from wasn't there. But I believe this is going back to COVID, and there's a lot of that going on. But I can tell you, Waterworks is a well-oiled machine. Their staff is very professional, they're knowledgeable. I have kind of poked around there and at commission meetings, and I'm very impressed.
I know this is a non-related question to the Waterworks, but going back to the building department, you talk about COVID, and we all know the issues behind that, of course. Right. But do they have any current backlogs because of COVID?
I don't know if it's, well, yes. Okay. Getting the permit these days takes longer than it used to. There's, you know, there's a lot of plans to be reviewed, a lot of codes to be interpreted, and there's a limited number of staff. Right. So again, I think it's something where they're working the kinks out, and it's getting better. Yeah.
And going back to Waterworks, Mr. Pete, what is the current capacity when you think of the expansion of the wastewater treatment system?
Right. Well, it's holding its own, and as long as there's no huge growth, I think Mount Pleasant Waterworks is in a good position to work with what they have. But again, the piping, the pipes, the connections, the pumps, filters, all those things, you know, they depreciate over time.
And so how would you actually help the Waterworks system change their leak adjustment policy so that they can actually notify customers when there are actually some problems with that?
So I think it's good the way it is. I personally experienced it twice in the last 6 months. Where one time my mom left a garden hose on in the backyard. She was trying to be helpful.
Right.
You know, water the vegetable garden. So she left it on, and my wife got an email shortly thereafter. I think it was a day afterwards, because it obviously took. What they're looking for is spikes in volume, and that was great. So I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. I know, or I had heard that there was some gripes about the new electronic metering system.
Oh yes.
Remember the day when they call them meter maid, right? They would go and check the analog gauge in there. But now it's all done kind of fly by wire. And when that started, there were people whose water rate usage, thus their bills, would go increased or decreased. And of course, if they decreased, they didn't complain. If they increased, but it's a more exacting metering device. So that's the real deal.
Wow.
Now, Mount Pleasant also offers a service which is kind of like a repair service and you'll remember, Quintin, that I said from the point of the house to the street, the wastewater system is owned and maintained by the individual. You can have a problem there too, and that can be an expensive proposition. So Mount Pleasant also offers a repair service. It's almost like an insurance plan, where it's added to your monthly invoice. So if you do get a problem, instead of you having to call, say, a plumber and deal with the unknown and what it's going to cost to repair it, Mount Pleasant basically takes care of it for nearly nothing.
Wow. So I've been trying to ask a lot of these leaders in Mount Pleasant this, but how many people actually right now want to be annexed into the town of Mount Pleasant when it comes to sewer?
I don't know that, Quinn. I know that there is a development near the Highway 41 bridge, and there are some small areas, some donut holes where they're considering that. But other than that, I don't know. I think what people want is they want the water and sewer, but they don't want to annex into town because the town would likely have higher taxes. And so it's kind of a sticky situation.
And you talk about those donor holes. What are those donor holes right now that are concerned when it comes to wastewater and water in the town of Mount Pleasant?
So again, there are areas on Highway 17, areas in Snowden. Now that is Mount Pleasant. It's just not the town of Mount Pleasant. They're in Charleston County. Charleston County is their government. So they're there. They can be brought up on a map. And those are, I would guess, slowly going away.
Going away. Wow. So when it comes to water in generalities, Mr. Pete, would you direct or indirect Pete portable misuse in obviously that aquifer recharge with reclaimed water?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Yes, sir. Would you use direct or indirect potable or reuse or aquifer recharge when it comes to reclaimed water?
That technology is above my head, but thankfully it's not at staff's.
Yes,
it's at staff's level.
Yes, sir.
And you got to remember, I'm going to be drinking from a fire hose here.
Yes, sir.
But I can't wait. I'm curious in nature. I can't wait to get a better grip on this. It's a lot. It's a lot going on, and unless you're directly involved in it, there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
It's vast.
Yeah.
And am I going to be an expert after year one is over? Probably not. And I think maybe that's part of the reason that they have a 6-year term for waterworks commissioners.
And I know you talked earlier about partnerships, so how did you work with DHEC and the DNR on the enhanced monitoring of, say, for instance, groundwater?
I think that's very important. I think their participation is critical. However, Mount Pleasant does a very good job of testing and analyzing and treating the water that it draws. But we're going to rely on the Council of Governments, the government at the state level, to determine the level of the aquifers, which there was a concern. There was that Google concern, which was pretty much alleviated. That they're not tapping into that aquifer as much anymore, taking more out of the lakes. And it's kind of involves global warming and rising seas as well.
How would you actually develop any additional groundwater wells to actually meet today's demands?
So they are adding new wells as we speak. It's being planned.
Wow. And how should the Mount Pleasant Waterworks, in your mind, Mr. Pete, accept new infrastructure that actually meets the waterworks standards?
Well, it has to. Yeah, that's part of the permitting process. Is that infrastructure gets evaluated both on paper, on informal plans. It's monitored during when the actual construction is being done, and then it has to pass tests afterwards.
And I know earlier you talked about everything moving electronically, which the waterworks has, but do you know how many meter customers are there within the Mount Pleasant Waterworks Commission?
Gosh, well, there's just under 100,000 residents in Mount Pleasant.
Wow.
So I've got some notes here that tell me that, but I would say that there's probably 20,000 might be a good guess. Actually, I don't know.
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
And you talk about obviously growth. Where do you see that number heading in the next 5 years?
I think we're going to have some growth. I think the baby boomers, as they call it, in another 20 years or so, I think you may see a subtle decrease or the change in population for Mount Pleasant may subside some.
Wow.
But again, that's an eventuality.
Yeah. And that brings me to my next question. What do you think will be the estimate of the projected growth of the water system?
It's got to keep up with demand. The waterworks staff has done a great job of mapping all that out in their 5-year plan.
Yeah.
But again, it's maintenance of the existing system that is a concern and something I'm kind of fascinated by, because I don't build new homes. I do remodeling and repair.
Right.
So when they're talking about maintaining the existing, I'm all over that. As a matter of fact, I took a tour of Mount Pleasant Waterworks facility and a wastewater plant last week with my daughter-in-law, and I'm sold. That is the neatest thing. It reminds me of a 50-acre aircraft carrier. It was so cool. Maybe when I retire, I'll get a part-time job. I'd say I'd walk around with a dustpan and a broom sweeping up trash, but there was none. The place was spotless.
Right, clean, very clean.
God,
just like the water is.
Yeah.
And you talk about that, obviously the water being so clean. So I wanted to ask you this, and this is very curious to me. What exactly is the maximum water demand?
Well, we don't really, we haven't gotten there yet. Again, that's, I think, a figure that staff has arrived at. I think the capacity meets current demand. There can be some breakdowns from time to time, but Waterworks does a great job of getting the systems up and running.
And I know that you talked earlier, and this is my last question to you, but I know you talked earlier about obviously the town of Mount Pleasant and Mount Pleasant Waterworks being two separate entities. But who actually owns the water system, Mr. Pete? Is it the town or Mount Pleasant Waterworks?
It's the citizens of Mount Pleasant that owns Waterworks.
Pete Loy, who's running for Mount Pleasant Waterworks Commissioner. Thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Man, this was awesome. Thank you very much, Quintin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Likewise.